Seth Welch's wife, Tatiana Fusari, was in tears as the couple sat side by side for their video arraignment today.
You're both charged with what they call felony murder.
In court documents, detectives say the couple told them they were aware of their daughter's skinny appearance and low weight for at least a month. The wife told detectives they did not get medical help over fear of CPS taking away their 3 kids, over distrust of medicine, and because of religious beliefs. All have been topics of some of her husband's rambling videos on Facebook. On doctors.
They're priesthoods of the medical cult.
On vaccines.
The righteous shall live by faith. It's God who's sovereign over disease and those sorts of things, and of course ultimately death. So it didn't seem smart to me that you would be saving people who weren't the fittest. If evolution believes in survival of the fittest, well then why are we vaccinating everybody? Shouldn't we just let the weak die off and let the strong survive?
An autopsy found the baby died of malnutrition and dehydration. Today, the judge ordered them to stay in jail without bond.
Herbert and Catherine Scheibel are charged with third-degree murder following the death of their 8-month-old son, Brandon, this spring.
Instead of caring and nurturing him, they ultimately caused his death by praying over his body instead of taking him to the doctor.
And unbelievably, this isn't the first time this has happened to the Scheibels. In 2009, their 2-year-old son, Kent, died. The parents did not seek medical care to treat him.
I tried the previous case 2.5 years ago, and the circumstances to that case to this case are eerily similar.
In the first case, the Scheibels were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Kent. The prosecutor asked for prison time, but the judge instead opted for probation and allowed the couple to move back to their home with their 7 other children. The judge did order them to seek medical care for their children in the future.
I was upset at that, and I was upset because I felt that they just didn't get it, and they weren't going to get it. And now here we are, standing here again 2.5 years later, another one of their children is dead, and they still don't get it.
Winona Rossiter broke down as she and her attorneys asked for leniency from Judge Daniel Murphy. She and her husband Travis were convicted here last month of recklessly and negligently causing the death of their 12-year-old daughter Sybil, who died from a diabetic condition after not receiving medical care. They're members of the Church of the Firstborn, some here today, that believe in faith healing. 3 years ago, Oregon changed its law to exclude spiritual treatment as a defense against all homicide and manslaughter charges, meaning parents like the Rossiters are now subject to mandatory sentencing under Measure 11. The Rossiters began their 10-year sentences immediately after leaving the courtroom.
This would be an excruciating way to die.
The medical examiner, a 16-year-old, didn't have to die. He suffered a basic bladder condition that went untreated.
He had backed up so much urine that it caused him to go into heart failure.
The boy's family relied on prayer instead of medical care. Neil Beagley died Tuesday inside this Gladstone home. Boy's family belongs to the Followers of Christ Church in Oregon City. Members believe in faith healing, not medicine. The teen who died is the uncle of 15-month-old Ava Worthington. She died in March after her parents refused to take her to the doctor. Carl and Raylene Worthington are now facing criminal charges for the toddler's death.
These kids didn't need to die, and they didn't need any type of extraordinary medical care to have been able to have lived. They died absolutely needlessly.
Members of the church were not available for comment on this, the latest faith-healing death.
Bailey, you guys have anything to say?
Remember, it was Jeff and Marcy Bigley who were convicted of letting their son Neil die of an untreated urinary tract condition. They went to prison in 2010 after Oregon cracked down on parents relying solely on prayer for their sick kids. We actually came here to Idaho because a former church member told us to look specifically for this grave, Garrett Dean Eels. Garrett was a 6-day-old baby. The coroner's report says he died in April of interstitial pneumonitis. That's pneumonia, untreated. We were also told to look for the grave of Jackson Scott Porter, who we learned was actually a baby girl. Your granddaughter only lived for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
She'd have never had any prenatal care. Do you regret that?
No, because that's the way we believe. You know, we believe in God, and we're the way God handles the situation, the way we do things.
Here in the Seavy's house, the coroner says their 14-year-old boy also succumbed to pneumonia. His mother was holding him on her lap when he died, and his name was Rocky.
What I will talk to you about is the law.
Okay.
I would like to remind you that this country was founded on religious freedom and on freedom in general. Freedom is freedom. Whenever you try to restrict one person or another in any fashion, then you're chipping away at freedom. Yours and mine.
Do you think your son had freedom of choice?
That's not a question I'm going to go into. I told you I'd talk about freedom.
Of the 553 marked graves at the Peaceful Valley Cemetery, 144 appear to be children under 18. That's 25%. Many of the autopsies on the kids buried at this Followers of Christ cemetery were done by Coroner Erwin Sonnenberg's office. And he's fed up with Idaho's law that protects faith-healing parents.
I had not heard of this at all.
State Senator Fred Martin serves on Idaho's Health and Welfare Committee. He's disturbed by what we found at this cemetery. He's promised us he will look at Idaho's law. But to the question of whether Idaho will follow Oregon's lead and make what these parents are doing a crime,
I'm not ready to go there at this time. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I'm very, very concerned about a child, but we're weighing the rights of the parents' religious beliefs, and I would hope they would not be in conflict.
First, an update to a baby's death. K2 first reported the child's parents have now been arrested.
This is the fourth time parents belonging to the Followers of Christ Church have faced charges. We have team coverage beginning with Carrie Tomlinson and the death of that newborn boy. Carrie?
Well, the medical examiner said the little boy died from a lung infection and complications from being born prematurely. He lived less than a day. Well, now his parents have been arrested, Dale and Shannon Hickman, charged with second-degree manslaughter. The boy was born at this house in September, as you saw in K2. Investigators say there was no one there at the birth who was medically trained, and no one called to get help for the boy. The religion of that church shuns medical help in favor of prayers.
The defense has rested in the case of two faith-healing parents charged with manslaughter in the death of their newborn son.
Some of the testimony in this case has really put the Followers of Christ Church on trial with its own members.
It has. There has been a rift in the church. David Hickman's grandmother in this trial has reignited that fight because of her position in the church.
Many of the followers are now questioning their faith after hearing from the church's matriarchal leader, Karen White, who testified a week ago.
My Bible, my Jesus Christ, tells me to put my faith and trust in Him. I don't put limitations on God.
White is married to Walter White, Jr., the grandson of Followers of Christ founder Walter White. While she testified she would never call a doctor for her dying grandson, she admitted she went to a doctor for an exam to get birth control pills. I tried to talk with White and a church midwife about the issue outside the courthouse.
Why is it okay for you to go to the doctor to get birth control, but then not help your grandson when he was in such a bad state?
I have no comment.
I mean, isn't that a kind of contrary to what the teachings in the Bible? I mean, preventing birth, but then not helping a baby to live?
I have no comment.
We understand this is very stressing for you, but how can you deny your son the treatment he needs to survive?
We are talking about the difference between potentially a child dying or surviving.
You could give him the consent to have this blood transfusion. Why won't you? Why can't you?
Their 7-year-old son has a genetic disease that's shutting down his liver, and he will die unless he has a liver transplant. Problem is, Mum and Dad are devout Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're refusing to give consent to one vital part of the surgery their son so desperately needs.
Is that the risk that you're willing to take?
The blood transfusion their little boy will most certainly need during the operation is completely against their religious beliefs.
Jehovah's Witnesses believe the Bible commands they must not ingest blood. They say blood represents life and only God is the giver of life. We're told what these parents are fearing is that their child will be polluted, both spiritually and morally. Are you willing to sacrifice his life for your religion? Is that what it is?
I said leave me alone.
There are many controversial cases relating to Jehovah's Witness children and blood transfusions. In Sydney this year, a pregnant Jehovah's Witness and her baby tragically died after the woman refused a blood transfusion. Also in New South Wales in 2013, the Supreme Court overruled the wishes of a 17-year-old Jehovah's Witness suffering from a lethal form of blood cancer. In London last year, a High Court judge ruled that the son of 2 devout Jehovah's Witnesses can be given blood. And in Dublin in 2008, a High Court judge said a 4-year-old girl could undergo a life-saving blood transfusion, despite her parents' objections.
They had a month to take the little girl to the doctor. A simple, treatable malady, type 1 diabetes, and they watched the girl lie there, wasting away in great pain, go into a coma, and die before frantic relatives out in California call the local police, call 911 and go, please help us. Too little, too late. The girl is dead. Now they're claiming freedom of religion.
Well, what happened is that this little girl laid for about a month at this family's home with, slowly wasting away from this diabetic coma. These family chose to act by praying. Now, if you ask the family, they said they did choose to act, although some people say that they chose to sit there and let the child die. And that's what police investigators are trying to determine.
What about all these kids who have died, though? You know, more than 30 of them.
I don't know. Then you have to go ask the Lord. You know, you can't blame all the sufferings on the parents.
If there is a God, then that dude is an asshole.